just get straight to the question, Scott, and then
I'm ready,
maybe mid-show we can chat about your latest article. So, from our beloved audience, this is the Loquacious Night, no time limit. And our first question comes from Gainesville. That's in Florida, you know, Scott. Horace Dillon. Mr. Biden was condescending to you once, and he never apologized. What would you advise the president about Ukraine today using this platform?
Well, the first thing I have to do is correct the record. Yes, he was extraordinarily condescending to me during my Senate testimony, and then he paid a very heavy price. Back then, I was actually popular amongst the mainstream media, and the Washington Post and New York Times, everybody turned on him and chided him for what he did. So he wrote me a letter of apology, and he actually invited me to his office, and we spent 45 minutes one-on-one hashing it out. And when I left, and in his letter, he said that he thought highly of me, and that if there was ever any things that I felt he needed to know, that I should contact him, and he was ready to receive me at any time. Now, that was a lie, because repeatedly during the lead up to the war, I was pounding on his door trying to get in there and say, don't go to war in Iraq. This is a really, really, really bad idea. And he would ignore me. And then he sent his chief of staff after me. His chief of staff called me a traitor once, said I should be charged with treason. And when I told him that if he said that one more time, he'd be wearing his teeth on my fist, that you don't tell a Marine in an enclosed space that he's a traitor to his country. That's a good way to die. He apologized, and then he acknowledged that I wasn't a traitor. I was just putting them in a very difficult position. But anyways, we're up to the final part of the question, which is, what do we do now? I would tell the president that he's making the exact same kind of error of judgment driven by arrogance, hubris, whatever term you want to use. And it's leading America down a path that we will end up paying a very heavy price, similar to the price we paid going down the road towards a conflict with Iraq. Except this one has potentially even graver consequences, such as, the whole world ending in a nuclear annihilation. And that he should take a step back, fire all of his advisors, and bring in people who actually know something about Russia to advise him on how best to get relations back on track. Because the best thing here isn't to confront Russia. We're not going to beat Russia. That just isn't going to happen. That doesn't mean Russia's going to beat us, but we're not going to beat Russia. And so we should work on, cooperation, peaceful coexistence, arms control, nice things like that. And then I saw a question down there. Did I ever think that Joe Biden would be president? That is literally the biggest joke in the world. No one thought Joe Biden would be president. Every time Joe Biden didn't even think he'd be president. Every time he ran for president, he got like 2%. Bam, gone. Plagiarism, stupidity, moron, foot and mouth, whatever you want to say about Joe. He wasn't going to be the president. And suddenly here he is, president. We live in a very strange world.
Well, Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator, met with Trump at the White House during his presidency, and he said he can't really reveal too much of the conversation, but except for one thing, he asked Trump who he thinks is going to be the Democratic candidate for president, and Trump said Biden. This is well before, it was known that he was possibly going to be the leading choice. Trump knew, or predicted it anyway. How many of those crazy Biden-isms did he throw at you during the meeting? Like how he always says, no joke, as if anybody would think what he said was a joke.
Come on, man. No,
I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip.
Not trying to be flip. Well, no, he is trying to be flip. No, he look, I don't want to say. I will say this, that he likes to put his hands on you. So it's a lot of, hands on. It's like flip, boom, pow. But it's just like, don't touch me. But
I'm not shocked to hear that.
That's why they get the limos and you don't.
Well, that's right.
Buford T. Justice
I
from
love the name.
Montague, Texas. Yes. And his question is kind of about justice, as a matter of fact. You
Right.
often state that the collective West under U.S. leadership tries to impose its rule-based order, whereas the rest of the world is more interested in a world order rooted in international law. Can you explain the differences and give examples?
Absolutely. Succinctly put, even though we're in the loquacious time, the rules-based international order is a series of mechanisms that were put in place by the United States at the end of the Second World War. We being the not only the victorious power, but being the richest nation on earth, we built institutions that were designed to further American interests. Sometimes ostensibly under the guise of providing aid and assistance, primarily financial in nature. The global economy had collapsed during the Second World War. We were it. I mean, we were clever in the way we approached. We destroyed the British pound. We destroyed the French franc. There was literally no competing currency out there, just the dollar. And so we used the dollar as a mechanism to provide loans, to make all business done by the dollar, et cetera. So that's the rules-based international order, the system that we put in place to control global structures to sustain American hegemony. And at the time, you could call it sort of a benevolent dictatorship because, let's be frank, the world was broke. It had just gone through, the most destructive period in ever. And we were building it back up, but we were trying to build it back up in our image. Now, this is happening separate from something called the United Nations that had something called the United Nations Charter. And the United Nations Charter is a treaty between the various constituent parties to the charter, the treaty, including the United States. And that's international law. The charter is international law. That's the laws that the world agrees upon to work with one another. And so what has happened is that the United States, in order to further its continued domination of the globe, emphasizes the rules-based international order, even though these rules are oftentimes in competition to or contrary to the law. But the law doesn't matter because we're a permanent member of the Security Council. Therefore, the law doesn't count. Whatever we want counts. This is why we can sanction people, even though it's a violation of international law. So, and this works. And I don't mean to be too cute, but I keep trying to come up with simple ways to explain extraordinarily complex things because, frankly speaking, that's the only way I can understand it. It's like a parent raising children. You have rules. Out there in society, you have the law. But in the house, it ain't the law, it's the rules. And so the parent is raising the children with rules. The United States was the parent, the world was our children, and we were raising them, which is fine until they reach adulthood. But the problem is, even once they reached adulthood, we wanted them in the basement, in mommy's basement. We never wanted them to leave the house. We wanted to control them. And the rest of the world finally said, no, we would like to actually leave the basement and go out into the world and deal with the law out there. And that's where we are today, where the United States is seeking to keep rule, keep order, keep hegemony in place by emphasizing the rules-based order. But nations like Russia and China, for instance, came together almost more than a year now. It was February 4th of 2022 when they came together in Beijing on the eve of the Winter Olympics. And Putin and President Xi said, we reject forever the rules-based international order, and we are pursuing a law-based international order enshrined by the Charter of the United Nations. So I think that long rambling answer hopefully addressed the question. If not, I apologize.
All right. Somebody's asking about the Geneva Convention. So since I'm drinking Swiss wine, why don't we be a little thematic? You want to address that question, departing from our format a little bit?
There's Geneva Conventions. Basically, the Geneva Convention, what they call the Geneva Convention, what they call it's a series of conventions. They were passed throughout, Some date back to the 1800s, some get in the early 1900s, all the way up through post-World War II. But basically, it was how the international community talked about international humanitarian law, the law of war. And that's what the Geneva Conventions are supposed to deal with, to protect civilians in time of war. So you put in, legal principles that become lawyers are out there just right now freaking out because they're like, "Shut up! You don't know what you're talking about." Probably not, but I do know what I'm talking about. I just don't know if I'm using the exact legally correct terminology. But the you get these laws. It's common, and it's international or common law or something, but it's agreed upon law, and which means that it's binding to parties. But parties also have to buy into it. And so you have parties to the convention, because this isn't like the Security Council passing a Chapter 7 law, which is applicable to all. You have to buy in. This is why, for instance, in World War II, the Japanese weren't parties to the convention. So when they captured Americans and Australians and British, they would chop off their heads, they would torture them, they would shoot them because they weren't parties to the convention. We, on the other hand, when we captured Japanese, are parties to the convention, so we were supposed to treat them with, in accordance with the rule of law. And so that's where we're at today. Basically, all of these conventions have been consolidated into something called international humanitarian law. The Red Cross has actually put together a very good binder that military professionals like myself, when I was in the military, would refer to, because this is a very effective guide on international law. Now, the military also has its own, the United States has its own standards, how we take international humanitarian law and then apply it to us, because a lot of it is subjective in nature, meaning how the different parties choose to interpret it to fit them. And like any law, it comes down to the negotiating record. For instance, the controversy about civilians. Remember early on when the Russians were going into Ukraine, there was talk about civilians throwing Molotov cocktails. There's a lot of controversy in Bucha where there were civilians manning checkpoints with weapons. And then they got caught and they were shot by the Russians. And people were going, war crime. And I'm sort of going, nah, that's not a war crime. They weren't wearing a uniform. They weren't properly trained. The international humanitarian law sets out the conditions. But there were different interpretations. Different nations interpreted it differently, et cetera. The bottom line is it's pretty complicated. But the International Red Cross has put together a nice thing. You can Google it, and it'll give you a good understanding of the Geneva Conventions that together create this body known as the law of war, or international humanitarian law.
All right. It is plural. And so is the word criteria, by the way, in case you were wondering. That's plural.
Did I say something wrong?
No. I was just giving an example.
Well, I know it's criterion. I'm always reminded of this. When I write a paper, I have a certain editor who beats me up and says,
what
it's
about
criterion one.
Right. And what about media? Is that singular or plural?
Do you have the answer?
I think it's used either way. I don't know what's quote unquote correct, but I've seen it both ways.
Media.
Yeah.
I don't know.
People use it both. So, I mean, usage is, I guess, what determines things as much as dictionaries. And coincidentally,
that's the beauty for the American version of English is whatever the hell we want it to be.
Yeah, kind of.
That's why I like being an American. They're like, that's improper English. That is perfect American.
If you understand what the person's saying, then good enough, right?
Yeah, that's my approach to Russian too.
So sticking with our theme tonight, coincidentally, we have a voicemail question from a gentleman named Filippo in Switzerland. Here we go.
Hello, Scott and Jeff. This is Filippo from Lugano, Switzerland, and this is my question. A lot of people think that Russia will defeat Ukraine sometime next summer. Have you ever considered that a fast victory is not their main goal? Don't you think that the war with Ukraine is part of a bigger picture, and Ukraine is just one of the physical battlefields where Russia is fighting against the USA? I have the impression that Russia's major goal is not a fast tactical victory over Ukraine, but is instead to reshape the world economic and geopolitical equilibrium. In other words, don't you think it's possible that since Russia is inflicting to the collective West more damages than the damages she's suffering back, Russia has accepted to bleed as long as it will take in order to break free from the US and the US dollar dominance. Sorry for my accent, and thanks for your answer. Ciao.
He's from Lugano, you see, and Lugano is actually a pretty cool place. But he said ciao because it has a heavy Italian influence in Lugano. Switzerland is one of those places that we normally say have a big German and French influence, but Lugano has the Italian influence. So we got it right there. We got the accent that has everything going for it. Speaking English, a hint of German, a hint of French, and ciao, baby. So no problem with your accent. I liked it. Now to your answer. Look, here's my problem with your question. First of all, very good question, and I thank you for it. Very well thought out question, very intelligent question. But for your question to actually hold water, Russia would have to be the one who initiated this. It means that Russia is seeking to achieve objectives based upon its actions. Russia didn't want this war. Everything Russia did in the lead up to this war was in an effort to avoid this war. Russia did want a new European security framework. We saw that when they submitted the draft treaties in December 17, 2021. So we know that that's their strategic, their ideal outcome from this. But when those were submitted, Russia wasn't seeking economic domination over the West because Russia was still very much economically intertwined with the West. The divorce hadn't taken place, and Putin wasn't in any position to initiate the divorce because that would have been economic and political suicide for Putin. That was one of the things that the West, didn't understand. Had they just let things be, we actually controlled Russia more than Russia would ever want us to control them, because the decade of the 90s going into the first 10 years of the 2000s, was a period where the West was investing in Russia, was, not just investing in normal Russian business, but we were working hand in glove with the oligarchs who were stealing from Russia, putting their money in Western banks. And there was this whole system of Western influence and domination over the Russian economy that Vladimir Putin and the rest of Russia found to be horribly inconvenient and inefficient, but there wasn't anything they could do about it, because you can't divorce from the people who own all of Russia's money, the oligarchs. And you can't separate from the West when 20 to 30% of your economy is intertwined with the West. So Putin was stuck with this. It was the West that initiated the economic sanctions, not Putin. It's the West that did the divorce, the very painful divorce of ripping 20% of the Russian economy away from the West. The West did that through sanctions. And it was the West that destroyed the power of the oligarchs in the way that Putin could only pray for. And Putin thanked them pretty much. He said, oligarchs, be off with you. He's like Jesus in the temple, the money changers, get out. He drove them out. And now Russia's in a very strong place, but it's not because of strategic planning by Russia saying this is what we intend to do. It's Russia reacting to the actions of the West. Is Russia benefiting from this? Yes, they are. But it wasn't, again, to give you an idea of just how the reality that Russia wasn't seeking this. Listen to Putin talk. And I will say this, you can say whatever you want about Vladimir Putin. You can love him, you can hate him. I don't care. I don't think he cares either. But the one thing we have to acknowledge is that when he speaks, he's a serious man who says serious things. He's not an American politician. When their lips move, they're lying. When Vladimir Putin speaks, it's a serious conversation with the audience that he's intending to have the conversation with. And he gave a presentation, I believe, earlier or in January, where he was talking about the economy. And he said, a lot of my advisors told me that because of the sanctions, we were going to have our economy shrink by 15, 20, up to 25%. Hey, guys, that's huge. I mean, imagine, having anybody's economy contract by 25%. That's a big deal. And the reason why I bring that up is Russia was very concerned. There was no guaranteed outcome. Today, Russia's sitting pretty, very pretty in terms of economy, especially considering what the world tried to do to it. But back in March, April, May, June, July, August, there was no certainty of outcome. Russia was very concerned that there was going to be this strangulation of the economy up to 25%. It turned out it was 2%, and soon it's going to be not. It's going to be growing again. But they didn't know that. And the reason why I bring that up is, again, if this was their plan, there wouldn't have been that much uncertainty because they would have been factoring in. But Russia, people keep saying, why didn't Putin mobilize earlier? That's another big question. Why didn't he mobilize earlier? Well, the answer is because he was very concerned about, there was three things that and we can get this now. Look, Russia's never come out and said this, so this is my assessment. You can take it with a lump of salt. I don't care. But, three things have emerged as we take a look at this special military operation in a retrospect. One is that it wasn't guaranteed that the Russian people were going to support this conflict. This was a controversial conflict. Russians going to war against Ukrainians, a big deal. That's why they didn't call it war. That's why they called it a special military operation. And so right off the bat, Putin has to be careful not to alienate everybody by going to war against Ukraine. That's why people like me got it wrong, you see, because when I originally said that Russia's going to roll through and destroy Ukraine, I was thinking war. And had Russia gone to war, we wouldn't be talking about Ukraine today because they would have been defeated. But Russia didn't go to the war. It was a special military operation, very soft approach. And the reason was that there was a lot of trepidation inside Russia, within the Kremlin, about how the people of Russia were going to react. And it was touch and go. There was a lot of people going, we don't like this. We don't like this at all. That's why he couldn't mobilize up front, because to mobilize meant you were going to war. Putin went into a special military operation with a peacetime complement of soldiers. See, that could be explained. You didn't need special permission from Parliament to mobilize, to expand. You weren't at war. As a special military operation. You were using collective preemptive self-defense in support of the Lugansk and Donetsk and all that. And then the other thing was the economy, which I just talked about. They didn't know how this was going to work. So there's a lot of uncertainty within the Kremlin about the combination of economic tightening with public unrest over a conflict with Ukraine. But then something happened. The collective West stepped in and made it. It's the same thing I saw with Iraq. We kept trying to sanction Iraq in hopes that the Iraqi people would say, it's Saddam's fault. But all Saddam had to do was say, I'm not sanctioning you. When I was president and there were no sanctions, we had a good life. You're suffering because of them. They're sanctioning you. They're the enemy, and it succeeded. The Iraqi people pivoted, and the support for Saddam was manifest. I mean, it became real. Here we have a situation where the Russian people may have started off by saying a little bit uneasy about this, but I think by the summer of last year, it became clear that the West was at war with Russia, that this was a war not between Russia and Ukraine, but between Russia and the collective West, especially when NATO injected tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment into the Ukrainian military, reconstituting it and enabling them to expand the scope and scale of the conflict. At that point in time, Putin said, mobilize. And the Russian people, by and large, responded to that mobilization positively. Not chest-thumping USA nonsense that you get here in the United States, but stoic people saying, yep, let's do this. We need to do this. We're at war with the collective West. And that's what's happening right now. This is no longer simply a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That was a tough sell. Right now, there's no tough sell. Russia acknowledges that they're at war with the collective West. Putin is more powerful, more deeply entrenched, and supported. His economy didn't collapse. It's actually growing. I deal with a lot of.
Do they have anything that's the equivalent of polls? Like here, polls are a real big deal. Do they have polls that are reliable that measure his popularity?
Yeah, and actually the poll that everybody goes to, and I can't get the name of it right now, but it's actually a poll run by people who don't like Putin. And so the West tends to support that poll. And that poll even says that Putin is just wildly popular, that his popularity rating is just out of the control. And he's just getting stronger. The longer this thing goes on, the stronger Putin's getting, because it's war. It's literally war between the collective West and Russia. Biggest mistake the West ever made was doing what they did right here, because they solved so many problems. Russia is going to emerge from this conflict stronger than ever before. because all of the uncertainties, all of the the insecurities that Russia had from the decade of the 90s, because the decade of the 90s was very tough for Russia. I mean, they were literally, supine on the ground with the American and Western foot on their throat, holding their body down. They had Boris Yeltsin, who was just this alcoholic idiot who sold out to the Americans every chance he could get. You had the oligarchs that were just robbing Russia blind. The United States was trying to dismember Russia. The war in Chechnya, in America, we're like, well, those Chechen rebels, come on, they were CIA funded. The whole purpose of that conflict was to get Chechnya to break away from Russia, setting in motion a precedent that would lead to the further dismemberment of the Russian Federation, which has always been the goal of the United States since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so Russia, even though it's big and we always talk about the Russians, I think a lot of Russians will agree with me. Russia was sort of broke. I mean, Putin was doing his best to fix it. I mean, you take a look at the infrastructure development in Russia since 1999 to today, it's doing very well. But Russia had insecurities. Russia had sort of an inferiority complex to the West. Russia had, economic schisms, no real industry starting up on its own other than some state-sponsored industry and defense industry and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, we solved all of Russia's problems for them. Because we made it easy. We made the hard decisions easy because we made them for Russia. We divorced from the Russian economy. We destroyed the oligarchs. We transformed a very difficult Russian-Ukrainian conflict into a not so difficult to explain Western conflict against Russia using Ukraine as a proxy. And the Ukrainians have helped out because they themselves acknowledge it's a proxy. I'll just leave it with this. I'm on that blacklist, from the Center for Countering Disinformation. And I am an information terrorist. I am a propagandist. I am the world's worst human being. And the number one crime that I've been accused of, the number one crime right up there, is that I dared say that this conflict was a proxy conflict between NATO and Russia using Ukraine as a NATO proxy. That was my biggest sin. Except that the Ukrainian defense minister came out last month and said, this is a proxy conflict between NATO and Russia, and we're the proxy, and we need you to continue on. So I'm looking forward to him joining me on the list of Russian propagandists and information terrorists. And I look forward to it. I mean, I think maybe we can even bring him on the show and maybe have some.
I'm sure he'd be very eager to come on. So let's schedule that ASAP. Now, speaking of Russia, we have a voicemail question from a gentleman named Vladimir in Russia, not Vladimir, no L. This is Vladimir.
Okay.
My name is Vladimir. I'm a lawyer from Russia. The key factors that are considered when determining the direct involvement of other countries in a military conflict under international humanitarian law are military presence, then control over military operations, third one, financing or training, supplying weapons, and the last one, direct participation in hostilities. It looks like all necessary factors are made regarding determination of direct participation of United States, Great Britain, European Union. Legally speaking, with all Rammstein's recent announcement of new weapon deliveries, MBTs, MIVs, and possible airplanes were too close to be imposed into World War III between nuclear nations. Can you, Scott, comment on each of these above 5 mentioned factors, if they were fulfilled by any other country or combined? And what is your opinion? Are NATO a direct party of a full-scale war?
I actually got that, Jeff.
That's a tough accent. His grammar was flawless, but it was very
better than mine. I'll tell you that. No, I understood what you're saying. Basically, he's talking about the different levels of engagement under international humanitarian law that could allow a nation to be classified as a direct party to the conflict, and he's basically making the case that that from the sanctioning to the equipping, the training, and now mercenary involvement, etc., that the United States and others have crossed all these boundaries and are legally, under international humanitarian law, parties to the conflict. I think that's, in a nutshell, what he was saying. And I agree with him 100%. Look, if the tables were turned, the United States would be accusing everybody who was providing support to a country to oppose us of being a party to the conflict, and we would be bombing them. We'd be interdicting. We'd be sinking their ships. We would be disrupting their economies, because that's what war is. But NATO is hiding behind Article 5. That's a shield. And basically, it's a shield of immunity that allows NATO to do things that, if it weren't for Article 5, which is the collective security clause, an attack against one is an attack against all. So NATO is able to do things that are literally, war, acts of war. You can't become the arsenal of another nation, which NATO is becoming. They're building weapons, they're supplying weapons provided to Ukraine. They are a party to the conflict. They are providing intelligence information. They are providing operational advice. They have people on the ground assisting in logistics. So, yeah, you're 100% correct, sir. They are parties to the conflict. Now, I think the last part of the question is, will this lead to World War III? It could, except for the fact that there is an adult in the room. That adult's name is Vladimir Putin. And Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership have been engaged in what's called escalation management from day one. They do not want this thing to escalate. They do not want this to become a direct conflict between Russia and NATO. And so they are engaged in a number of things. Friend, ask yourself the following question. Why is Zelensky allowed to walk, talk, live, breathe, do whatever he's doing? Because under normal circumstances, he is what you would call a command and control target. He is a legitimate target of war, and he should be killed immediately. But he's not. They're allowed to. I mean, this is this artificial world where international people can come to Kiev and have meetings and talk and coordinate about weapons supplies and all this kind of stuff, all of which is literally an act of war. And so if you want to hold a conference in Kiev to talk about how we're going to provide you with tanks and stuff, literally the Russians should be putting a cruise missile right there and ending everybody's life. But Russia's not. Why? They don't want to escalate. People are coming in from trains. Why hasn't Russia shut down the ability of Western diplomats to come in via train? Because they don't want to escalate. Russia is sacrificing strategic advantage that could be accrued by more apt targeting in order to manage the escalation of this conflict. A lot of people out there don't get it. Russia doesn't want World War III. And one of the main reasons why Russia doesn't want World War III is that Russia is winning. Russia will win. And so Russia's not going to do anything that allows this conflict to go the way that Ukraine wants it, because what Ukraine wants is escalation. Ukraine is begging for escalation. They're begging for NATO troops to come in. They're begging for NATO aircraft, because that's the only thing that will save Ukraine. So why would Russia play into Ukraine's strategic vision by seeking to escalate this conflict in a way that could enable Ukraine's strategic ambitions to actually become manifest? Russia's job isn't to help Ukraine get NATO to intervene. Russia's job is to keep NATO from intervening, which means they are going to sacrifice certain strategic advantages that would happen if they did strike these things, because they know they're going to win on the battlefield. And the interesting thing is going to come up in the end game of all this, because I think that Russia is going to destroy the Ukrainian military pretty soon. I know there's some controversy. Prigozhin just came out and said it's going to take 2.5 years to take up to the Dnieper. Dude, it didn't take him 2.5 years to get to Berlin from Stalingrad. Okay, so no, I don't agree with that. But and maybe he's trolling. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that statement. But no, I think actually this war, from a military perspective, not only will be over by the fall, but from Russia's perspective, has to be over by the fall. If Russia allows this conflict to drag on, then things like more tanks and F-16s start coming in numbers that could be a game changer. And we had that controversy before, Jeff. Changing
Yes, I
the
remember.
game. It doesn't mean Russia loses, but it means that the game is now changed and Russia will have to do something different to adapt. Russia doesn't want to do that. Russia already did the different adaptation, 300,000 reservists, increased defense industry production, this new army. They need to win now. They need to win big, and I think they're planning on doing that. But then we have the political aspect of it, denazification. How do you get rid of Zelensky? How do you resolve the issue of Western Ukraine? And there's a big question mark on all this still. And I think Russia's going to do very well militarily. We're going to find out what kind of diplomat Lavrov is starting in, let's say, September, October, as we get into the political resolution of this conflict, where Russian diplomats are going to have to convince the West to basically concede defeat and allow a political revision of Ukraine to take place that is to the sole benefit of Russia. And that's going to be a tough nut for the West to swallow, but they're going to have to. They're going to have to if they want to terminate this conflict and get on with their lives. And I think there's a desire in Europe right now that this war has gone on too long. It's got to come to an end. Europe's got to get in the business of rebuilding their economy, an economy which, by the way, thanks to Seymour Hersh, we now know that the United States carried out a am I in trouble? But Seymour Hersh just wrote a fantastic article.
He thinks I'm a grammar Nazi, so he's apologizing for not putting a question mark.
But Cy Hersh just wrote a fantastic article on the Substack about the Nord Stream attack, which basically proves that it was an economic Pearl Harbor carried out by the United States against Germany. And there are severe economic consequences, and Europe's going to have to figure out how to resolve all these issues. And they're not going to be able to do that if they have the cloud of war hanging over their heads. So we'll see.
All right. I just remembered, I think I neglected earlier to say how folks can buy this wine if they're interested. I mentioned in the video that at first I didn't love it, but as it had a chance to breathe, I began to like it quite a bit. And today on day 2, it's great. Better on day 2. And if we had more time, I would have asked Brandon about how people are supposed to know how long you're supposed to let wine breathe, because sometimes you're supposed to let it breathe a while, a very short time, long time. I don't know how you're supposed to know, but this apparently needs to breathe for about an hour, and it is absolutely great today. Unfortunately, you can only get it if you're in California. They only sell to California, but some of our viewers are in California, so that's the website if you want to get some.
Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, Jeff, when we were taught how to let something breathe, it was basically to take our hands off their throat. They're like, "Let it breathe, Scott." And I'm okay. Mm-hmm. So does that help?
It's sort of similar in a way.
Okay.
After you drink enough Maverick wine, you might feel compelled to do that.
I like Maverick. Yeah. Now, okay, so we're going to have Maverick Red, and we're going to have Mother Goose White.
I don't know. We gotta think about
that. Well, here's the thing. I know people, you want to talk business, but let's talk serious stuff right now, okay? Because we have a crisis in the Ritter household. A crisis. We have a Chihuahua that we bought named Machismo. Mm-hmm. And Machismo is the most wonderful dog in the world. Machismo was supposed to be our superstar. We were actually trying to market him because he howls at commercials. He has great personality, and he was positioned to be the star. Maverick was never supposed to be anything other than a sidekick. But Maverick has come in and stolen the limelight, and Machismo now is just pouting. He's unhappy. Yeah, this is troublesome. So we might have to start bringing in Machismo, or else we're going to have. I think the dogs are calling up divorce lawyers. There's a schism in the Ritter family.
Sort of like our podcast. You were meant to be the star, and now people
You've seized it.
Yeah. People are in love with the way I read questions. It's such an important skill to
I saw what you did to the graphics, Jeff. I mean, you didn't think I saw it, but I did. Ladies and gentlemen, this show's about to be rebranded. It's no longer going to be Ask the Inspector. It's just going to be Ask Jeff.
Okay. Well, speaking of which, it's actually Tori who inserted Maverick a minute ago. The lovely Tori Mansfield backstage. Thank you, Tori. So should we move on to the next question? Or before we do that, why don't we talk about your most recent article in Substack? It's about the best speech that you never gave. Now, what does that mean? That sounds like it might be a little provocative. It's so out of character for you to be provocative. But
actually, Jeff, this is one of the... a lot of people know me as the weapons inspector that got in the face of the Iraqis. but they don't realize that I was actually one of the most effective diplomats out there. I actually prevented a couple wars because of diplomacy. And I think I have behaved in a very diplomatic, uncharacteristically diplomatic in this thing. You see me with a smile right now, but people who know me know that I can be the meanest SOB on the planet. And there was a time, gosh, yesterday or the day before, I don't know, this week has flown by, but where I was ready to go to war. I mean, I was just like, no, hell no. Let's just bring out the nukes, take down the planet. Let's go. And fortunately, people who are calmer and wiser talked to me. And in short, this is what happened. As everybody knows, I was invited to speak at this rally. I did not want to go to the rally because, as Jeff and I have told everybody, I don't believe in an anti-war movement. We have lost faith with the anti-war movement. It no longer exists. It failed in Iraq. It's just Jeff and I both burned ourselves out on the anti-war movement. We really did. And but I was told this is a new anti-war movement, and that if this was a chance to bring left and right together and all this stuff, and they really wanted. They had heard me speak at this Plan B. The other cancellations that take place with the Ukrainians. I'm canceled everywhere.
I'm telling you, the wine, we got to call the wine uncanceled.
I'm pretty sure at some point in time, these NAFO bandits, these little Shiba Inus, are going to convince Diet Coke that I'm not allowed to drink Diet Coke anymore. I'm going to have to secretly transition to Diet Pepsi or something like that. I know that'll make some people happy, but not me. Anyways, back to seriousness. I gave a great present. I mean, I don't normally tout my own horn here, but as I was speaking at this restaurant in New York City, I realized that I was firing on all cylinders. I got caught up in the moment, and it was one hell of a speech. And it really moved a lot of people, including the head of the Workers' Party, who approached me and said, you got to go and speak. I drove all the way down here to talk to you, or up here to talk to you and bring you in. And after thinking about it and talking about it, I said, what the hell? I'll do it. I'll do this. But in my gut, I'm just like, I know what's going to happen. And it happened. They canceled me. The Libertarian Party decided that they didn't like me for a variety of reasons. Apparently that it's hilarious. The Libertarian Party, I didn't realize the Libertarian Party was this. I know they have Scott Horton, who's Mr. Anti-War, except he knows nothing about war. He just, you assume that little title. He stole it from Justin Raimondo. I don't know what's going on with Scott. I don't care. But they're not, the eunuch. But they're not an anti-war party. I mean, they're trying to rebrand themselves. But so I'm apparently not anti-war enough for them. I don't have the cred. I don't have the street cred. I've never been in a demonstration. I didn't walk side by side with George Galloway in London in September 2002, leading 1 million people down to Hyde Park, where I spoke in front of them all. I never done that. I've never actually put everything on the line to try and stop a war with Iraq. No, forget my street cred. I'm pro-war. I'm also a Putin propagandist, so I'm not allowed to be up there for that. And I am the worst human in the world because they really like to call me a twice convicted pedophile. That's their thing. You see it with the NAFO people all the time. Right. Scott Ritter speaks, twice convicted pedophile. Scott Ritter. And the Libertarian Party picked this up. And suddenly they fell apart. We can't give the stage to this guy, da-da-da-da. So they pulled me. Bam. And I'm like, I wasn't happy with it, but I was like, okay, screw it. I don't want to be here. But then, as we talked about previously, all the speakers said, nah, if he's gone, we're gone, da-da-da. They said, to save it, we got to put Ritter back on. So they put me back on. And I thought, there it was. I'm back on. But no. The Libertarian Party found a way to basically self-destruct. And they literally did. It just blew apart. I don't know if there's going to be a Libertarian Party when this all is done. I don't care. I'm done with the Libertarians. But they self-destructed. But in doing so, they attacked me in the most vile manner. And so I had a choice. First of all, they wanted me to gracefully disappear. And I'm like, are you high? You have called me every name in the book. You invited me back on. If I disappear now, it's almost like you deliberately set me up here to be canceled so that in the future, you have now built a template of cancellation that everybody can use. And I will never be allowed to speak anywhere, do anything. I will be canceled my entire life. That ain't going to happen. So I'm like, no, if you want me to go, you have to fire me. And if you fire me, you actually achieve 0.5 of the 5 elements that need to be proven in a civil lawsuit of libel. And I was going to sue the living crap out of these people. And trust me, I would have won because they literally set up all 5 elements of libel, the last one being damage. And imagine the amount of money a good lawyer could put on being offered a national stage, the largest anti-war movement in modern American history, only be denied that. We can turn that into millions of dollars of loss, and I would have named every one of those little people. I'm not allowed to use bad language on there, and I was ready to go. I'm ready to go to war and all that stuff. But then people came up and they said, Scott, look, here's the deal. Yes, the Libertarian Party sucks, and if you're watching the Libertarian Party, you suck. You really are horrible.
Clownish beyond belief.
Yeah, but the Workers' Party, whether you agree with their politics or not, they accomplished something. And I'll say this too: Angela, the chair of the Libertarian Party, she's not a bad person. I like her, and she tried. She just was put in a horrible position. I mean, God, I feel sorry for her. She should never allowed me to be invited because she wasn't ready to take the heat. But anyways, Nick. He's built something here. He really has built something here, and it's something that could be that has potential. He's brought a lot of people in from a whole variety of walks that are coming together in a common cause. I don't know if they're going to succeed. Given the track record of movements of this nature, I wouldn't go to Vegas and put money on it, but I'm not going to be the person that's responsible for destroying it. And that's what would happen if I went to war against the Libertarian Party. It would have been destroyed, and then that would have been put on me. Nobody would have come around saying, Scott, you had every right to do this. Stand up for your rights. I would have been the guy that destroyed the peace movement. And, so I decided that...
Imagine getting blamed for destroying a movement that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. So I decided to take one for the team. So I backed out. And I hate doing that. Anybody knows me, I don't have a reverse gear. I don't back up. I don't retreat. It's forward, just like at the beginning of the show. Go, go, go. And I had to find a reverse gear, and this hurt me a lot. I mean, I'm smiling right now, but I got to tell you, inside, it's not good. But
Tough week.
But we did it. But then, then the question is, how do you respond to this? And we already did an episode where we hashed out all the dirty details, and I ripped open my life and I poured out my emotions, and I, tried to explain everything, and it was all honest. But I don't want to do that again. I mean, that's not pleasant.
That's what videos were made for. They can just
we made videos, we wrote articles, we went on record, and all this kind of stuff. So I said, well, how do we do this? Do we pretend it didn't happen? Can't do that either. And so what I did is I had drafted a speech that I was going to deliver. And I said, why don't I just publish the speech and let it speak for itself? Say, you guys kicked me off, but this is what I was prepared to do. Because, see, I was viewing this platform that they were giving me as an opportunity to do what they claimed they wanted to do, to use as a springboard into something bigger, something better. Not that this isn't good, but they're talking a modest 2,000 people they want to come to this thing, and I'm sitting there going 2,000, BS. We're going big, baby. Go big or go home. We're going 1 million people. Central Park, June 2024. Why June 2024? Because in June 1982, there were 1 million people in Central Park rallying in support of arms control and disarmament, and 5 years later, we got the INF Treaty that saved the world. And I talk about this in my speech. So that's what I wanted to do, and they basically went, you're not going to do it. Well, guess what? That's my speech. We put it out there, and everybody now knows what should have been said on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. on February 19th, and I'm not backing down. This is a journey that we're going to take together. It's me, you, us, and we are heading to Central Park in June of 2024 to put 1 million plus bodies in there to send a signal to the United States government that the American people don't want to die in nuclear holocaust. The American people want a future for their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and the only way you're going to have that future is through arms control. We're not telling you how to do it, but we are telling you what to do. Arms control nuclear reduction. That has to happen, or this country disappears. And that's the message I have. Jeff and I are working on a plan to make this happen. And those Libertarian Party people, let me tell you this. If you're a member of the Libertarian Party, please come and join us. Come and join us as individuals.
Because we want everybody. Unlike them, we don't subject people to purity tests, which is the
I don't
worst
care
strategy in the world.
who you are, what you are, as long as you agree that we should have arms control and no nuclear weapons. If you can agree on that and you want to work with us, I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what your sexual, definition, he, her, him, what. I don't care.
Come one, come all. Even the bisexual paraplegic midgets in particular, I think.
Especially bisexual paraplegic midgets, because, but no, God, we're going to get in trouble for that, Jeff. Thank you. We were doing good, and now
don't worry. They don't have any kind of.
But my point is, we're going to make this happen.
But the thing is, it's a bit of a misnomer, though, Scott, because you never gave the speech. First of all, it got a great reaction, so much so that within an hour or two, what's the name of the podcast host who read the speech on his podcast? Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood. I wish. No, but Clint did a great job. I'll find.
Yeah, and also we've decided to make a recording of it with you delivering the speech.
Yeah, that's going to be tough, but I'll do it. I mean, look, that's a speech I could have easily have given on the spur of the moment, but it's an emotional speech. It was designed to be emotional. I had somebody criticize me. They said your speech was overdone, over the top, and I'm like, you're reading it. I've been giving motivational talks for real. I'm not talking about going out there and selling cornflakes to people. Let me put this scenario out to people. Imagine you're in a room of 150 scientists, chemists, biologists, nuclear people, missile, honest to God, rocket scientists. Their necks are all very thin. Jeff, show your neck, please. Okay, they're that thin. and their arms are thin, and they're pasty-faced because they spend all day in. They're very smart people. But what they don't do for a living is go out there and kick ass and take names. And now they're ready to join this team led by a maniac who has this reputation of creating international confrontation. And I'm going to send them into Iraq with no weapons whatsoever. All we're protected by is a blue armband, blue hats, and we're United Nations weapons inspectors. And the Iraqis at this point in time are so pissed off at us that they try to intimidate. And fear for the Iraqis is like blood to a shark. If you go there and show fear, they swarm, you're done, finished. I've seen inspection teams collapse on the weight of their fear. They can't do anything. My teams don't do that. So I have to go in and deliver the speech. And I was famous for this. I would come in, and it was the alpha dog speech, and I'd come in and I'd just give the speech. And by the time I've done, I had 150 geeky scientists turned into madmen, ready to rock, ready to roll. This is what I did for a living. I went to Omaha, Nebraska, in front of a crowd of 7,000 conservative Republicans who hated my guts because they thought I was some sort of left-leaning peace activist. And by the time I finished, I had 7,000 people on their feet demanding action, what they could do. And they ended up calling, Hagel, Chuck Hagel, the
Well, why are you saying this will be too difficult? Because you won't have an audience?
No, what I'm trying to say is that the guy was reading it saying it was over the top. It was over the top because that's how you motivate people. I'm not going to get in front of 2,000 people. I'm not going to get up there and give them a milquetoast speech. I'm going to give them a speech that's going to have them standing, cheering, heart pounding, etc. But you can do that once on the spur of the moment. It's an emotional speech, Jeff. It's an emotional speech. And you want me now to look into a camera and read it? What do you want me to do? That's what I said to you.
That's what I said to you on the phone when we talked, and you said, "Oh, I can do it. I can do it." Now
but then I started to do it, and I'm like, I can't do this. So we'll work on it. I mean,
I know how to get you riled up.
Well, Scotty Boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in.
You feeling angry now?
There's a movie. Have you ever seen Cuba Gooding Jr., Tom Cruise, the movie? You can't remember the name.
Scotty Boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does.
Jerry Maguire.
Above your
Jerry Maguire. Have you seen Jerry Maguire?
About the sports agent?
Yeah. And at the end of the movie, Cuban Gooding's with the guy, and you're not going to make me cry. You're not going to make me cry. And then he do it. And he starts crying. So Jeff, you're not going to make me cry. I am not going to read this freaking speech and cry on tape so you can embarrass me. I'll try and get it done. It might take several takes, but it's an emotional speech. It's meant to be, because this is serious stuff. We're talking about it. We're smiling. We're laughing right now. Guys, we're talking about the end of the world, literally the end of the world. And it's going to happen if we don't turn the corner. This is not a joke now. I'm dead serious.
No, I know you are. So multiple recordings is fine. If it's
it might take multiple recordings.
Well, I have a lot of patience. How about you? Just have some.
I have a lot of patience.
Just have something to drink.
Diet Coke. No, you don't want me drinking beer with this thing, because
I didn't say alcohol necessarily, but just to keep your throat lubricated.
Anyways, I like.
All right, so that's what this is in Substack. You can read the speech at scottritterextra.com. And it sounds like we might be making a recording of Scott doing the speech, depending on his emotional state. You're not making a promise.
I'm promising I'm going to do it. I'll commit to the mission. I just might be a little interesting to do it.
All right. Mollusk undersea, the Baltic Sea. In light of the revelation that the U.S. administration knew that it was committing an act of war against Germany by blowing up the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, does Germany have a legal standing to declare war on the U.S.?
Yes, 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 and yes. But that's the least of our issues on this one as Americans. Look, we committed an act of war against Germany. It was Pearl Harbor, economic Pearl Harbor. Plain and simple. We destroyed a $12 plus billion of critical security infrastructure with no reason. We just did it. But the key thing here, and again, this comes out through Cy Hirsch's reporting, which is fantastic, is that the president and his advisors bypassed their obligations, constitutional obligations to work with Congress, to report to Congress. They specifically kept Congress out of this loop. So that's, what they call mens rea, intent. So now we can prove the intent that they sought to bypass Constitution. This is impeachable. It's not just an act of war, because hell, America does this all the time. But this is an impeachable offense. This is perhaps the most impeachable offense that any president has engaged in and since Richard Nixon. And this might even be bigger than what Richard Nixon did. So, and where's Congress? Where's the noise? Where's the media? Where's the people? I mean, that's the thing out of the story. It's not just that, we attacked Germany to declare war. We have a president who, conspired with his senior leaders to bypass constitutionally mandated requirements to report to Congress to carry out an act of war. It's bad news.
All right. John Dillon from Gainesville, Florida. Russia always helped Ukraine after the Soviet Union collapsed. Not the West, not Europe. Russia still sends pensions to retired people from the USSR. Russia turned a blind eye to the stealing of their gas and paid for just allowing the transfer of what Russia built in Ukraine. Why is Ukraine disputing a piece of land that should have never belonged to Ukraine?
And I think he's talking about Crimea there, because that was gifted by Khrushchev in the 1950s. And yet it's overwhelmingly populated by ethnic Russians who don't identify with Crimea, with Ukraine, they identify with Russia. You got to be careful what you say here, because sometimes telling the truth hurts people, and then it sounds an awful like Russian propaganda. But Crimea is an artificial state. Just straight up is. Look at the history of it. Look at the composition. Look at how it was created. It wasn't created naturally. You've appended Galatia on it. How does Western Ukraine, part of Austro-Hungarian Empire, Poland, and now suddenly it's Ukraine. Well, what about Kiev? The center. You could say, well, Kiev and Rus. We could go back in history and talk about that. Well, the Donbass wasn't Ukraine, but that was given to them because of the economic resources to invite. And then Crimea was tapped onto it. And it's been this confusing mass of different groups of people thinking Ukraine being something different. The Ukraine that was imagined at the end of World War I is not the Ukraine that was being imagined by Bandera at the end of World War II, which is not the Ukraine that was being imagined by Kravchuk, I think, or somebody of that nature. At the end of the when the Cold War ended, and the same thing, different visions. There's not, this is why it's sort of, people need to understand this. When people are talking today about the father of Ukraine, and they use the word Stepan Bandera, it tells you just how, I gotta watch my language, how confused they are. Ukraine is an artificial state, and its artificiality has been managed by the United States from the beginning. They're starting to get documents coming out now. They're being declassified that talk about the conversations that were taking place between the United States and Boris Yeltsin about Ukraine, about the future of Ukraine in the 1990s. And the United States said, let us manage the Ukrainian problem. We know that there's problems with with nationalism, with the crazies, but we'll manage the crazies. Well, we weren't managing the crazies. We were empowering the crazies, because we were always viewed stripping Ukraine away from Russia as a way of weakening Russia. Crimea, has, Sevastopol, very important naval base, which literally who occupies Crimea controls the Black Sea. So the United States, it's not that Ukraine wanted Crimea, it's that the United States wanted Ukraine to have Crimea so that Russia didn't have Crimea. And that's why Crimea has factored in so much. When Russia came in and just stole it back in 2014, when I say stole it, took it back, that irritated a lot of people, because that disrupted the grand plan, the grand scheme. And what Russia's doing now in terms of taking back the Donbass, taking back Novorossiya. And they probably aren't going to stop until they take back Odessa and Kharkov too. Although Odessa, I just don't know what's going to happen there. But in my heart of hearts, I just can't believe that Russians are going to let the Ukrainians burn 48 people to death for the sin of being Russian, and then allow this Russian city, the city of Catherine the Great, although not anymore because the Ukrainians tore down her statue, but she built that city, she made that city, it's a Russian city, and I find it hard to believe that if Russia wins this war, as I believe they're going to do, that they're going to let the pearl of the Black Sea remain in Ukrainian hands. So Ukraine's going to lose a lot of stuff. They're going to suffer, but maybe that's for the best, because that'll clarify what Ukraine is. And what Ukraine isn't is a land that deserves any ethnic Russians in it, not after the way they've treated them, not the way that they've outlawed them. A lot of people don't realize that in April of 2014, the Ukrainian government basically declared war against the ethnic Russians of Ukraine, calling them terrorists, unleashing the army on them, the rape of Mariupol. That's what started this whole fight. Ethnic Russians can never again live in a nation defined the way that Ukraine is defining itself, with this artificial language. I mean, even their president, Zelensky, he had to study Ukrainian because he spoke Russian. And what they call Ukrainian, go to Galicia, go to Lvov, go to Western Ukraine, they don't speak that either, because they speak something different. It's Ukrainian language is this sort of artificial language that, again, I just point out the fact in Poland, when they take all the Ukrainian refugee children and they're building schools now to educate them, what language are they speaking? Ukrainian? No, Russian, because that's literally the lingua franca in Ukraine.
Sweden listener, which is from Sweden, believe it or not. Could energy beam weapons be deployed to protect NATO nations against any nuclear missiles? I have read that this is the next generation of weapons, and shooting beams is way less expensive than counter missiles. Russia supposedly has this ability. ?
I mean, all sides have been developing or trying to develop laser weapons. I remember in the 1980s, we were putting laser beams on top of like 747 type aircraft to fly them around to see if we could shoot down warheads as they came in. It's not as easy as everybody thinks it would be, or else we'd have laser weapons. The power supply for a laser is significant, and therefore we just identify the weakness of it. I mean, if you're going to build a weapon system whose Achilles heel is power supply, all they have to do is take out the power supply. Missiles, maybe aren't as good as the lasers, but they work, and you can build lots of them, and you can layer their defenses, etc. I don't see laser beams becoming the weapon of the future anytime soon. They're just very complex. They're very hard to build, very hard to maintain, and keeping a power supply up. I mean, again, just take a look. Let's imagine that Ukraine had a whole bunch of lasers, but now the Russians take out the power grid, and where are the lasers going to get it? They're independent power supply. It ain't independent when it's taken out. Anyways, that's just my opinion. I mean, it's one of those weapons that in theory could work very well, but war ain't pretty. War ain't a laboratory. War is muddy, bloody, and filthy, and things that require pristine cleanliness tend not to function very well. And lasers require a lot of pristine cleanliness.
Nice shirt, by the way, Scott. That's an unusual shade of brown. It works.
This is maroon.
It's maroon. Okay.
No?
Well, I'm not going to argue. It might be. It doesn't show up as quite maroon. It's a little bit browner than most maroons. But in person, I'll take your word for it.
Well, I wear this just in case I get shot in the middle of the show. It won't show the blood.
Oh, okay.
Because there's Ukrainian assassins out there trying to get me.
That's the rumor. George from Philadelphia. That's where the Liberty Bell is. Did you know that, Scott?
I did.
All right.
I saw National Treasure, so I know.
Oh, okay. That's the only reason you know, right? Could Russia have waited for Ukraine to send ground troops into the Donbass before countering, or have launched airstrikes instead of a ground campaign, as NATO did in Yugoslavia? I appreciate that these opinions might not have made as much sense militarily, but might they have been better from a public relations point of view?
Good question. First of all, understand that Russia's Air Force isn't organized, and their doctrine isn't. You can't mirror image what the West has done with its Air Force with Russia's Air Force. So Russia wouldn't have used a purely air campaign. They would have used a lot of cruise missiles and long range missiles like they're using right now. The Russians put a lot more emphasis on missiles than they do aircraft for delivering precision guided strikes. So they wouldn't have been able to replicate the what NATO did to Serbia, because Russia uses different weapon systems to achieve those results. Waiting for the Ukrainians to attack, the Donbass and Lugansk areas, they created their own fighting forces. There were a lot of militias that came together, but they sort of coalesced into sort of semi-formal structure later on in the conflict. But then in 2015, the decision was made to, under Minsk Accords, to demobilize, to only keep those numbers of troops that you needed for a minimal of defense, send everybody else home to go to work, etc. So they dropped their numbers from, say, 30 to 40,000, dropped them down to 8 to 10,000. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are building up this massive capability, NATO trained, by the way, United States trained, of between 60 and 90,000, some people say up to 120,000 troops that were massing to attack. And had they attacked, they could have easily, I believe, overrun the defenses of Donbass and Lugansk and sort of solved the problem. So they would have liberated, and then they would have appealed for international support. Now the problem set for Russia is horribly complicated. So that's why Russia carried out preemptive collective self-defense. They preempt the threat, the imminent threat posed by this grouping of Ukrainian forces in eastern Ukraine. You preempt it, and in doing so, you seize the initiative. And that's always very important. Don't let the Ukrainians have the initiative, because then the Ukrainians get to dictate the outcome. And again, their goal, I think, was to make rapid progress, confront the Russians with a fait accompli, and then turn to the international community to solidify their gains. And now Russia would be fighting a diplomatic conflict explaining to their people while they're mobilizing to take fight a Ukrainian conflict. Because remember, if Ukrainian moved on the Donbass, that's a Ukrainian on Ukrainian conflict. It's not Ukraine versus Russia. So what Russia had to do is redefine legally this conflict. And that's why they had, you had the referendums for independence. And then the independence was recognized. And then they created a collective security arrangement, and then Russia could, under international law, intervene preemptively in collective self-defense. So I think Russia did what they did. They structured it legally in a sound way. I know there's a lot of people out there that disagree with this, but I call it the Kosovo precedent. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Russia simply replicated what we did against Kosovo. And they seized the initiative, and Russia's been, with some exceptions, Russia's been in charge of this, from the beginning. They suffered, again, the game changer, where billions of dollars of NATO equipment reconstituted NATO military in the summer of 2022, allowing the Kharkov counteroffensive and the seizure of the right bank of Kherson. But now Russia's got the initiative back, and they're moving. So I don't think any of those options would have worked for Russia. I think they would have given it would have been to the advantage of Ukraine, and Russia would have been foolish to adapt any of those.
Shubhang, and I'm sure that's the absolute best pronunciation ever, from India. Why does the USA keep pressuring India to break our relationship with Russia? Can the U.S. engineer a coup to install a more U.S. proxy-ish prime minister in India?
Well, the U.S. keeps pressuring India to break relationship with Russia for obvious reasons. The U.S. wants India to join in on the sanctions. The U.S. wants to strip India away from Russia's sphere of influence. The U.S. wants to dominate India. The U.S. wants to turn India into part of the global community that is prisoner to the rules-based international order that we discussed earlier. India isn't part of that. India actually is part of the BRICS, not the G7. They're, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, and now we have other, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Argentina, and others, Egypt, talking about Turkey, talking about joining. Could the U.S. orchestrate a coup? Well, the U.S. believes it can do a coup just about. They're trying to do a coup in Russia. I don't understand why people don't get it. Navalny, hey, pro tip to everybody out there, he's a CIA asset. He's a CIA asset. Michael McFaul played a role in his identification and his preparation, getting him transferred to, I think it was Yale, where he did a fellowship under again, I'm not giving away too many secrets. Go to the webpage, guys, where they put all the Yale fellows, and look at the guy who is the advisor, and look at his resume and see the intelligence affiliation. This is
you said that Putin's popularity is increasing. So do they literally not see that? Are they in denial about that? Or they think that even though he's getting more popular, they can overcome it somehow?
They're in denial. I mean, it's amazing. Look, there's a couple people out there. Julia Ioffe. I call her a Russian-hating Russian. Anne Applebaum. She is just basically the world's worst Russian analyst. She hates Russia. Fiona Hill hates Russia. We can go on and on. Michael McFaul, Mr. I like Russia. He doesn't like Russia. He hates Russia. All these people are, and these are the people that have influence. I mean, these people get published in all the big names. Yeah. They're Council for Foreign Relations, Stanford, the whole works. They're the ones that are spreading Russophobia in America today. But the key to their Russophobia isn't to tell the truth. The key is to exploit the ignorance of the American people to continue to reinforce negative stereotypes about Russia. And so the last thing you want to say is Putin is popular. What you have to say to account for his popularity is that Putin is a brutal dictator, an authoritarian leader who has manipulated the economic and social weaknesses of Russia to hold the Russian people down. That's how you explain this. You don't talk about the reality of Russia. You talk about the fiction. And because most Americans aren't capable, they don't have the tool set necessary to deconstruct this, they just go, yeah, that's good. Michael McFaul said so. Had to be right. Fiona Hill said, I read Julia Ioffe. She said that, and Anne Applebaum was on TV saying the same thing. They get inundated with this garbage that shapes their minds. but it's not the truth. The truth is Putin's a damn popular president.
Okay. Artyom from Moscow, or the Moscow region. Everyone keeps stating that this conflict is essential for survival for Russia, but not for the West. Yet the West is still pushing very hard, and I suspect that this war is essential for them too, since its world dominance depends on the outcome. Does this mean that we will only see further escalation?
Well, this isn't about the existential survival of the West. The fact is, if let's say that NATO and the United States accepted Russia's terms that were put forth in the draft treaties that were submitted on December 21st of 2021, that wouldn't have been the end. Russia's not asking for the end of NATO. Russia doesn't care about NATO. All Russia does is they don't want NATO on Russia's borders. They don't want it on their doorstep. So Russia's saying that Russia has legitimate spheres of influence, legitimate security interests that have to be respected, just like Russia must respect the West's legitimate spheres of influence and security influence. There needs to be a new European security framework that acknowledges that Ukraine is in Russia's sphere of influence. Therefore, Ukraine cannot be part of NATO. That Georgia is in Russia's sphere of influence, and there Georgia cannot be part of NATO. And that NATO infrastructure that has been expanding in violation of the agreements that had been made between NATO and Gorbachev back in 1990s will be pushed back to its 1997 levels. What that means isn't that Poland stops becoming a NATO member. No, Poland is a NATO member. It just means that NATO infrastructure, non-Polish military resources, will not be deployed to Poland. That's part of the deal. That doesn't mean that Russia wants to destroy NATO, is trying to bring down NATO. Just Russia is looking for a new European security framework. But the problem is, to accept the Russian European security framework, you have to accept the fact that Russia is going to survive. Russia is going to thrive, and that's not the policy we want. This is a struggle for Russia's survival. The United States is seeking to bleed Russia dry to create domestic unrest so that they can empower people like Navalny to rise up and remove Putin, become the next generation of Boris Yeltsins who are going to put Russia back on its knees before the superior West. This is why it's a battle of existential survival for Russia, because if they lose, that's probably their future. And I don't think any Russian wants that future, except maybe Navalny. But for the West, the fact of the matter is, if you study Russian history, if you study, Russia's objectives, Russia doesn't have a desire to invade and occupy. That's an American thing. We keep mirror imaging our approaches, our methodologies. To give you an example, people keep talking about hybrid warfare. I mean, you hear it all the time, especially in the Baltics and in Poland. The Russians are masters of hybrid warfare. And you say, well, how do you know that? Well, because Valery Gerasimov wrote the doctrine on hybrid warfare. And everybody said, yeah, Gerasimov's the father of hybrid warfare. And yet you look at it and you realize, no, guys, the paper you're quoting is Gerasimov writing about hybrid warfare the way the West uses it against Russia. But you see, we can't be honest about this. We have to mirror image what we do on Russia back. And so we mirror image that Russia wants to dominate the West, wants to physically occupy it. Russia doesn't want to do any of that. This isn't a battle of existential survival for the West. The West can survive and thrive, in a post-conflict Europe, as long as they find a way to peacefully coexist with Russia. But in order to do that, you have to acknowledge that Russia will survive and will thrive, that you aren't going to weaken Russia. You're not going to dismember Russia. You're not going to control Russia. You're going to have to learn to live with Russia as an equal. Europe may be able to do that. The United States is going to have a problem doing that for a while, because we still are imbued with the Cold War mentality that we won the war against the Soviet Union. Therefore, we have a duty, responsibility, and obligation to ensure that Russia never again rises up on its own 2 feet to replicate the Soviet Union's ability to compete with the United States on a global scale. We don't want to do that again. So our job is to keep Russia down. So again, Russia is the only nation that can actually be destroyed by losing this conflict. Besides Ukraine. Ukraine's gone. Forget Ukraine. Finished. But the West, there's no Western nation that's going to disappear if they lose this conflict.
I guess this is pronounced Rednaxala almost joined NATO land. A lengthy question. I'll try to get it all out smoothly. Is it, from the military point of view, likely that a disarmed and weakened Germany will face a newly built Polish army in the near future, noticing all the compensation demands for World War II from Poland to Germany? If Poland makes a move to Ukraine, is it automatically a direct NATO involvement, or might it be presented as Poland's own initiative, which does not imply NATO protection to Poland?
Hey, Poland, let's just keep this in mind, keep this in the back of your head. The Germans are walking away from the never again mantra they were supposed to be repeating forever after the end of the Second World War. And they're doing that which the world said they should never be allowed to do, which is bringing together a nexus of industrialism, nationalism, and militarism. That doesn't work out well for Poland. Never has. So the last thing I think the Poles would think they would want to do is get into an armed conflict with Germany. When was the last time Polish troops occupied Berlin? Like never. When was the last time German troops occupied Warsaw? Gosh, that wasn't that long ago. So Poland right now just they're taking advantage of the fact that their membership, together with the Baltic states and together with other Warsaw Pact, has allowed the United States to divide Europe. And I mean, Donald Rumsfeld spoke about it. He had old Europe and new Europe. And so new Europe is basically facilitators of American hegemony. And Poland is trying to redefine itself as the focal point of American attention in Europe. Germany used to be that. When it was West Germany, all the big bases were there, all hundreds of thousands of troops were there, etc. Poland wants to become the new West Germany. So they're posturing, but Poland will never be able to confront Germany. That's the quickest path to national suicide. The second quickest path. The quickest path is for Poland to think that they can go into Western Ukraine unilaterally. First of all, understand this. If Poland moves into Western Ukraine and Russia responds, there will be no Article 5 because it's not collective self-defense. Poland is actually initiating the conflict. They lose it, just like when Turkey went into Syria and got hit by Russia. There is no Article 5. Now, Poland can make a case for Article 4, which isn't collective self-defense, but rather nations acting in collective security interests. Article 4 is the war article for NATO. They went to war in Libya with Article 4. They went to Afghanistan, Article 4. They did Kosovo, Article 4. And if Poland is going to try and get NATO involved in a conflict in Western Ukraine, they're going to have to convene an Article 4 council and get NATO to agree that it is in their collective interest to impose, say, a humanitarian zone in Western Ukraine to protect millions of refugees and prevent them from coming into Europe, to provide, maybe a no-fly zone and all this kind of stuff. If Poland does that under Article 4 and then Russia responds militarily, now it won't be an Article 5 war, but it'll be an Article 4 war. Nations can come to the assistance of Poland, etc. The problem for Poland is, who's going to come to their assistance? The British? The British talk big, but they got nothing. They're all bark, no bite. You could put the entire British military into a large soccer stadium and have 20, 30,000 unsold seats. That's just how pathetically small they are. France, sorry, you're not going to get any French troops deployed. Spain, no, they ain't leaving Spain. Portugal, that ain't going to happen. Italy, nope, they're not marching. Turkey doesn't even want to play the game anymore. There is no NATO military that's going to march to the assistance of Poland. So Poland's on its own, 165,000 troops. They want to make it a 300,000 man army, but you have people leaving the Polish military, stripping away the experience it needs to expand. So Poland just has to watch out because, Ukraine, there's a saying, I got to watch the language here, but FAFO, fool around, find out. Now that first F doesn't always have to mean fool, but fool around, find out. Ukraine fooled around and they're finding out. And Poland has to be careful.
Remember that song? I fooled around and fell in love.
That's a good song too.
Elvin Bishop, was it?
Elvin Bishop Band, yeah.
Yes. Tori Mansfield. I bet you don't know who Elvin Bishop is, but you're doing a great job, and I want to thank you. And let's do one more of our submitted in advance questions, and then let's show some love to the live audience who are responding with some live questions. Centaur. Oh, my God. Vladivostok. I think that's right. The Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say that okay?
You did okay.
All right. There's a video on the internet, that would be the World Wide Web, Scott, of confirmed usage of chemical weapons by the armed forces of Ukraine. Drone drops canister that explodes, and then Russian soldiers start convulsing, trying to cover in water, but drowning in convulsions. Horrible death. Do you think the United Nations will at least condemn Ukraine for that? Any consequences for Ukraine for using forbidden chemical weapons?
Well, there's another video that exists that predates this, which shows Ukrainians from a named unit. So it's an actual Ukrainian military unit preparing drones and the payload for drones. And the payload is hydrogen cyanide, or basically cyanide-based chemical agent that are in these canisters that then are going to be put on drones. And that's the whole idea. And they've been saying they're going to do this. So now you have that video. And then you have this video that the guy did. Look, it's a horrible video to watch. But you can't say confirmed. I just, as a weapons inspector, it ain't confirmed. It's a video, but I haven't tested. And I haven't done any soil sampling to find out what the thing is. I haven't taken blood from the corpse to find out. I don't even know what the name of the dead guy is. I don't know how he died. I don't have a certificate of death. Was it acting or was it? Don't know. But what we do know is there's a video that suggests something very bad happened. And why is this important? Because in the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, they have an intelligence unit that their job is to monitor the, what is that thing, Jeff? The World Wide Web? Yeah,
yes.
Monitor the World Wide Web to basically look for this kind of stuff. And we know that they did this because regarding Syria, the white helmets and the other anti-regime people were able to fabricate videos, put them on the World Wide Web, and the OPCW went, aha, Syria is evil, mobilize, send teams in, inspect, investigate, do all this stuff, convene the Security Council, get the United States, France, and England to act on these videos and start bombing Syria. All of that actually happened, but it was all fake and all lies.
Yeah.
Here we have something where we have a named unit saying, yeah, we're going to do it. And then you have a video that indicates they actually did it. And where's the OPCW? Why aren't they sitting there going, we demand immediate access. We want to interview these people on that tape. We want to, go in and do soil samples. Russia, we need to go to this lake. We need to geolocate this facility, team A and team B, and soil samples. We need the corpses. We need to go to the morgue. We need to draw the blood. We need to interview people. We need to do everything that they did with Syria, but nobody's doing anything. Where's the Security Council convening an emergency session to mobilize the forces of the world to take on the evil Ukrainians? While this is happening, remember there's another video out there too, continued execution of Russian prisoners of war. And we know who did it. We have their names. They know who these people are who murder because they're stupid. This is the problem with Ukrainian criminals, and all their soldiers who do this are criminals. They do it. They brag about it. They show their faces as if people are going to think it's no big deal. No, dude, you just committed a war crime. You killed a Russian prisoner of war. You're going to pay the price. But why is it always up to Russia to do this? I mean, Russia's going to, trust me, Russia will solve all these problems in the end. But where's the rule of law? Where's the international, all these people believe in international humanitarian law and international law. Where are they? Why isn't the Security Council screaming? Why isn't OPCW being mobilized? Why isn't the international community outraged by these crimes? Why is Zelensky allowed to enter? Could you imagine Bashar al-Assad, after being accused of chemical weapons, doing a world tour? Hey, Bashar, good job killing those people with sarin nerve agent, but why don't you come to Paris so Emmanuel Macron can French kiss you in public and give you a medal? Go to England and shake the king's hand. you mass murdering son of a bitch, and then speak before Parliament and give him a goddamn fighter pilot helmet as if you're some sort of hero, you chemical weapons using bastard. I don't understand it. Zelensky is the president of a criminal nation, and yet he's being wined and dined all over. Bashar al-Assad didn't do a damn thing except comply with the international community's demands that he get rid of his chemical weapons, and then he got set up by the OPCW working hand in glove with the White Helmets and other anti-Assad things, and the world mobilizes against him. You know, the OPCW probably needs to go away, probably needs to be disbanded because it no longer has any credibility, none whatsoever. It's literally a tool of the United States, Europe, NATO to fulfill their, not to fulfill the mandate of prohibiting chemical weapons, but to use chemical weapons as a vehicle to create excuses for military intervention. It's disgusting.
You know, you mentioned something that I've been curious about. There's an old saying that the camera doesn't lie, but technological advances are such that nowadays, well, the camera can lie.
Yeah.
So what should people think when they see a video of some horrible thing? Is there any way to test its validity with regard to?
I mean, first of all, the beautiful thing about images of that nature is that they provide a frame of reference. Mm-hmm. So, you can try and physically locate a place, because one of the problems in the old days before videos like this is that I remember doing it. You have to interview a lot of people, and you have to draw maps, and then you have to go and get U2 imagery or satellite imagery and try and match the map to the image. And you're sitting there, some guy says there's a building with this, and so you have to drive around and take photographs and match, and so a whole bunch of work to try and locate something. But if you got it on a videotape, it becomes a little bit easier, especially if the videotape moves up, you can get a horizon. You can rapidly geolocate, which now allows you to come in and forensically investigate the ground. And there's a lot of things you can do forensically once you get there, soil sampling, etc. Plus, if there's dead bodies, as I said, you can go and get the blood drawn, things of that nature. But the video is a frame of reference, but from as proof, going to court, it doesn't prove anything. You still need a dead body. You still need the blood to show that it was exposed to, for instance, hydrogen cyanide. That's the thing about using an agent like this. If I can get the body, I can prove what killed him. But it's an investigatory thing. But by itself, no, it doesn't mean it, because you can fabricate. You can fabricate.
Right. And I don't mean to cast aspersions on anybody in particular. I'm just saying in general. It's hard.
Look, if in theory, I can make the following argument that everybody in that first video, they're sitting there going, "Hey, yeah, they're Russians wearing Ukrainian uniforms. They're Russians using commercially available drones, and they're opening up refrigerators, pretending to be Ukrainians doing this. And then the Russians could have cooked up this thing, hired two actors, and said, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to drop this thing, and then I need you to go shaky Jake, do the goose dance or the goat dance, and pretend to drown. Okay, hold your breath for 15 seconds, cut away, cut, up, run, go. I could make that case too, that this is nothing but Russian propaganda designed to frame the Ukrainians. That's why when you say the camera don't lie, the camera can lie, because if it's a fraud, it's a fraud. If that's a Russian, thing, they did a really good job. The last time we tried to see this, when the Syrians did it with the OPCW and the White Helmets, coaching, everybody's like, look, they're wearing hazmat suits. And I'm like, it's a training suit, no protection. And the guy that's with them ain't wearing any protection. So why do you have a guy in a Class A hazmat suit, which means it's the most dangerous environment in the world? You have to wear this all day. You're on SCBA, except you're in a training suit, which means you're going to die. And if there's really Sarah nerve agent there, and then you have a guy diddy bopping next to him, wearing sandals and no gloves, touching. I mean, if it's there, he's going to start doing the shaky jakes too. That the camera actually told the truth. It was a fraud. It was a fake. This stuff that we're seeing, it looks pretty convincing. Therefore, that's double the reason why there needs to be an investigation.
I have a friend who thinks that Biden is not actually the president, that they're doing some kind of artificial intelligence thing or something like that.
Well, if it's artificial intelligence, it's doing a damn bad job, because
All right, let's show some love to those who are showing us love. That would be our live audience. Ryan Milton, the very muscular and follically challenged Ryan Milton in Austin, Texas. Thanks for the contribution. Oh my God, why did I even do that? I must be a masochist. Was our hero defeated by the evil forces around the Rage event? That would be you, Scott. I think you are our hero. Or is he strategically falling back to build for a bigger offensive? Biceps are getting bigger. Explain June 2025.
Well, first of all, Ryan, where's the damn penny, you cheap son of a $49.99? What the hell, dude? Give us a clean 50.
No, I asked somebody about this. They said these are actually the choices that they present. I don't know why. Yeah, I'm not sure
Okay,
why.
Ryan, thank you for clicking the $49.99.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll buy him a beer. Was our hero defeated by evil forces around the Rage event? No.
He knows the answer.
I know he knows
Answer it
anyway. He saw the comment I wrote in the Telegram channel. There's a book called Strategy written by a British colonel, Little Hart, I think his name is. I read it a long time ago, but it talks about the indirect approach. And you see, I talked earlier about me getting angry and all that. The mistake I would have made is if I brought into actuality my anger and acted on it in a manner that brought down this event. Because for the next year, between now and June 2024, not 2025, June 2025 is when we're all going to be sitting there having the 1 year anniversary of the million person gathering.
He's a year off. June
2024 is when we're going to actually do it. Tricky question, Ryan. You're a sneaky guy. But the thing is, I would have been spending the next year explaining why I decided to destroy, as Jeff said, a movement that doesn't exist and will never exist, but they're trying to make exist. And you got to give them a chance. You got to give them a fighting chance. The other thing is, let's put it this way. How many people can I right now guarantee to bring to Central Park? I don't know. I think if I asked all the followers and everybody, I could probably get a couple hundred people to Central Park right now. And the last time I did Marine math, a couple hundred ain't a million. But now when you take a look at the people that I just helped win over to our cause by making this decision, by allowing them to go forward, they have all committed to help. Now, we'll find out if a commitment becomes reality. But these are people who have 500,000 followers, 1 million followers. And now they're also, a lot of them are similarly minded, meaning that a lot of the followers probably replicate. But my point is, when you take a look at all of these people, including Nick's list, he has 400,000 people on this list. We now, if they buy into this cause that we're talking about, we now might be able to have a core of, let's say we could get 200,000 people into Central Park. And that's a good foundation, because now upon this, we have a year to expand that number so that we have a real chance of getting 1 million people or more in Central Park. This is the strategic thinking. Lose a battle, win the war. Strategic retreat. Look at General Surovikin, General Armageddon. He said, we have difficult decisions ahead of us. He withdrew from the right bank of Kherson. Everybody called him a loser, but he consolidated his defenses, and now they're getting ready to go on the attack. Well, General Ritter withdrew from the Rage Against the War thing, but consolidate the forces and attack. And that's the goal. That's the objective here. There's the old saying, I say it all the time, when you're explaining, you're losing. And I don't want to spend the next year explaining to people why I've been singled out as being the guy that destroyed the one chance we had in the modern age to rebuild an anti-war movement. Let's give the anti-war movement a chance to succeed. And if it does succeed, let's take advantage of that to build something bigger to accomplish the goal that we're trying to set out, which is 1 million people in Central Park demonstrating in support of arms control and nuclear disarmament.
All right. Even though they were mean to you, I'm promoting their rally. I was just flashing the speakers on, and
they were mean to me, Jeff.
They were mean. They were very mean. They were very mean.
Mean to me.
Whatever. Whatever. Serge is our regular. He's always chiming in with money and questions and comments. I like Serge.
Serge, good guy.
If Schwerpunkt is Schwerpunkt even possible in the age of almost total surveillance when neither side can hide the concentration of its forces? How do you amass troops for the breakthrough if the enemy will always see it? Thank you. You're welcome, Serge. Thank you.
Well, Serge used a nice German word, Schwerpunkt, which is the point of decision. But there's another word called Maskirovka. That's a Russian word. That's for deception.
I know Schadenfreude, right? Is that the right?
Is it Schadenfreude? I thought it was Schadenfreude. Who knows?
Sure, yeah, well, you know the word I'm trying to say.
I know what word you're trying to say, but now you put me in a position of embarrassing myself yet again. It's a big word, Jeff. Many syllables. Doesn't work in this brain. Schadenfreude.
Tori, you're on the case. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, darling.
Odious. Okay, don't play.
Odious.
You did it.
Odious.
Okay. Is that the new Odious or the old Odious?
No, I don't know why they're trying to usurp the original and official Odious on Telegram. I have no idea why. This is the only Odious there will ever be. So we're good friends, Telegram people. Please don't mess with our Odious.
Odious.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, that's the original.
That's the original. There's nothing wrong unless they want to make a case as to what's wrong with it. But I don't know why. I haven't heard that case made.
Well, again, to answer this question, one of the things is you just have to become innovative in this. You can, because of the mobility of modern forces, I can disperse capability, and I can do it in a manner which leads the enemy to believe I can be going here, there, here, there. But as the battlefield gets shaped, I can bring these things together into a Schwerpunkt, pop through and do it. But while I'm doing that, I can do diversions too. So the enemy who's collecting, here's the thing about intelligence, problem I used to deal with all the time. If you got a lot of things collecting data, that's a lot of data that has to be evaluated. And what did you do, Jeff?
No, occasionally when I see somebody making a donation, I just give them a little thank you. I don't mean to be too obtrusive about it. That's all.
I just saw your lips move, and I thought you were.
I was just thanking her for the donation.
Signal, like I did this, and you're like.
I do it a lot. This is the first time you've noticed.
Seen it?
I'm just nodding, thanking people. Trying to do it discreetly.
I'm watching you, Jeff.
All
I'm
right.
watching. Okay, where was I? Forces dispersed, Maskirovka, deception movement. And the interesting thing is that the Russians have acknowledged this. They've acknowledged that part of their what they're doing right now is designed to mislead the Ukrainians, not the Ukrainians, the NATO intelligence. They know that NATO's up there looking. The big guy is out there seeing everything. And so the Russians can't just come in and line up all their tanks and say, this is the direction we're going. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now on the battlefield. And so to create a lot of movement, a lot of data being collected. So hopefully the intelligence analysts are getting confused. Just a little war story to do this. Back in the Cold War, the Russians had massive amounts of electronic warfare, signals intelligence collection capability. And so we developed encryption. So we would encrypt all our communication, but it was a pain in the neck. I think it's easier today, but trust me, in the 1980s, ain't nothing easy about it. And you had these cryptological keys, and you had to key all your stuff on time, on schedule, key. Everybody had to have the same key, so you can talk. And if you screwed up the key, you couldn't talk, and it was all confusing, all that stuff. And I came up with the solution. It wasn't very popular, but I said, why are we doing this to ourselves? The Russians are collecting all this stuff. They don't have instantaneous analytical capability. They got to collect it, then they got to take it back, and they got to process it. And then some people have to sit there and listen to it, transcribe it, and then come up with data that's gone. Other analysts who read it, try and marry it up with other intelligence, and it takes them hours, if not days. So if I'm in a tactical battlefield where I need to communicate effectively within a framework of a couple hours, strip the damn crypto, communicate clearly, act rapidly, and the Russians are going to sit there and collect it, but they're not going to be able to respond to it because we overwhelm them with data. And that's the thing. So I think the Russians right now are in the business of generating data points so that the intelligence collection of the United States, which is very effective, is sucking it all up. And then there's poor people like me sitting back there going, holy cow, what does it all mean? And they have to study it all. And by doing that, the Russians can basically do the modern day version of Maskarovka, the deception. And I think when the Russians do hit with their Schwerpunkt, I don't think the Ukrainians are going to know. They aren't going to be able to predict exactly where that went. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe the Americans are tapping into Russian comms, and the Russians are, communicating, and they haven't put up a false chain of communication. Because normally, if you're going to do this, I'm going to have guys putting out 3 or 4 different communication chains so that people are listening in, don't know which one's real. But let's say the Americans have that. Maybe they'll be able to predict it. I still think the Russians are going to have such overwhelming force that no matter what, the Ukrainians are going to be beat.
Yana Kernberg. Thank you, Yana. What do you think about the Magnitsky Act? How do you pronounce that?
Magnitsky.
I think I might have even said that. Magnitsky Act. Who decides whose name to include in this list? I think it's a big heist in a history started by the U.S. And by the way, Scott, thank you for your work.
Well, thank you, Yana. And thank you for the $10. Jeff will use it wisely. Jeff doesn't pay me, by the way. I just want to let you guys
don't tell people that. They might believe it.
He makes me beg. Scott, do you want money? Beg. Anyway, I'm kidding. I just sick Maverick on him. The Magnitsky Act, there's a guy named William Browder who ran a investment guy, a heritage investment. I can't remember. I don't know. But he was in Russia. And the bottom line is he's a crook. He's a criminal. He did what everybody did in Russia in the 1990s, go in there and exploit loopholes to make yourself very rich. And he had a lawyer named Magnitsky, who's not really a lawyer, but he was an advisor. And they got caught up in a corruption scheme. And Browder was able to get away, but Magnitsky was arrested and prosecuted and jailed, and he died in prison. And so Browder created this whole campaign about the Russian abuse, that they murdered Magnitsky. And so Browder, because this is in a period of time where the United States is seeking to weaken Russia, bring Russia down, took his case to the American Congress, politicized it, and so they created the Magnitsky Act, which allows the United States to punish people who were involved in the suppression of human rights in Russia, et cetera, et cetera. And Congress named it because they have to put a label on everything. And so this became the Magnitsky Act. It's just what the United States does. That's the reason why the world is starting to walk away from us, because we suck as a nation. We do stupid things like this. We use American law and tend to believe that we can, just because Congress passes a law here, that the law should have application globally. It doesn't work that way, America. You may think it does, and it may have worked that way in the past, but not anymore. Russia could care less about the Magnitsky Act.
All right. This is all very important, but even more important is that I am now at 2,999 followers on Twitter. I wasn't looking for that. I was just looking to see how our stream was doing, and that's fine. But I happen to notice that's kind of a milestone. I mean, I know it's not Ritter-esque levels, but for me, 3,000 would be a milestone. So 2,999. Who wants to bring me over 3,000? Citizen Jeff is the handle.
Should I follow you, Jeff?
You already do. You already do. I don't think you can follow me twice.
I'll use one of my bot accounts.
Screen share. Make sure. All right. All right. I'm not sure what's going on with the screen sharing. I was trying to figure that out. All right. Let's do a couple more. Timur Palcheva. $40. Thank you, Timur. Hi, Scott. Recently, Mr. Prigozhin gave an interview to War Gonzo. I think it's time to bring Wagner in the interview with Scott Ritter. What do you think about this idea?
I think it's a great idea. So do the producers of the Scott Ritter show, who bring in great talent all the time. And my understanding is they are actively trying to get Wagner to agree to an interview. And it's just been a tough interview to get. But as you pointed out, they're starting to do interviews. Wagner's not going to give an interview unless Wagner believes it's getting something out of the interview. I don't know how to make it value added for him, because I'm not here to be a propagandist for anybody. I would like to interview Wagner. I think it would give an opportunity for the audience to get some insight, because there's a lot of people talking about Wagner, including me, who really don't know a damn thing about it. I mean, we know what we can garner, we read into it, but wouldn't it be nice to get somebody from Wagner to actually say, this is what Wagner is. This is how Wagner was created. This is, is Wagner part of the Russian military structure or outside of the Russian military structure? And these may be questions they don't want to answer, which is why they may not want to come on the show. But we will continue to try and get a Wagner representative. Would be nice if it was Prigozhin, but if it's not, it could be one of his commanders. But we'd like to have them come on the show and have an opportunity to explain Wagner to a Russian audience, because the Scott Ritter show is broadcast in Russia, but also a broader American and international audience. Believe me, we're trying to do it. It would be a hell of an interview.
All right. Well, that's very important, but even more important, look what the fans just did. See that figure? They took me up to 3,012. What a great audience we have. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that.
All right, what else day?
All right, you're Mr. Over 100,000. This is nothing to you, but to me, 3,000 is.
I'm jaundiced. I'm cynical. I'm jaded. I mean,
yeah. Sorry, I'm not Mr. 100,000. Sorry, I'm just.
I'm only at 100,000 because of you, Jeff. Only because of you.
Right. Well, I got you pretty much on Twitter, right? Is that
you did? You brought me back. You right. And you're whining about it ever since.
Yeah, whining. Rita something or other Muhammad, $20. Thank you. Oh, hold on here. Look at the first 4 words there. Jeff, you are amazing. Tori, can you make those letters larger and underline them and put 5 exclamation points after them?
Bold.
Just need clarification. I don't know what that means. Mr. Ritter, do you not receive all the funds from this show? I told you not to say that. They would take you seriously.
All right. You know what? I am an honest guy. Let me lay it out to there. Can I do this, Jeff? Can I answer this honestly?
We always answer honestly. Why would we?
Here's the deal. Jeff and I, when we started our relationship almost a quarter of a century ago, Jeff is the hardest working person in the world. I'm just some idiot that can be brought in, and every once in a while I can throw words together in articulate fashion and motivate people. But I don't get to do that unless Jeff organizes it and works his butt off to make that happen. And that was the relationship we had from the very beginning. Jeff was the guy who made it happen, and I just flew in and went, wah, 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 and and all that. Normally, when I worked for speakers bureaus, basically whatever speaker's fee that would be out there, they would get 15 to 20% of it. And Jeff thought that was what I was going to do with it. But Jeff's my partner. This is a 50-50 operation. Jeff and I, we make fun of each other. Sometimes we hate each other and fight each other over constitutional issues. But we are actually very good friends with a lot of history. And this doesn't happen without Jeff. This wouldn't have happened without Jeff. It may have not. I mean, who knows? Maybe Jeff would have done something without me, probably because he's a smart guy. But I'm grateful that Jeff gave me the opportunity to do this. And this is a 50-50 proposition. So I'm just telling everybody out there right now, when you donate here, it's a 50. Jeff and I, that there's joint funds. We take that money and we pay for things that they're required to make this happen. And then we split what's left 50-50. That's how it works. This is a 50-50 partnership. And there ain't no Scott Ritter without Jeff Norman. End of story.
Scott is a very generous person. I'm not the only beneficiary of his generosity, by the way. You may notice that even though our Substack is very successful and it's bringing in some income, he's still writing, for example, for the Consortium News and Sputnik and all these other places because they've stood by him. And
loyalty, baby.
Yeah,
loyalty.
That's how he is. He's very, very loyal.
When you have the entire world trying to cancel you,
Yeah.
and I mean the entire world trying to cancel you, the people and organizations that stand by you, you stand by them, even if things are going okay. Even if, from a financial standpoint, I could say I don't need to write for, this, that, and the other thing. First of all, I do need to write for them because even though Jeff says we're doing okay, we ain't millionaires. So, I'm going to keep writing for other people because baby needs a new pair of shoes, and I got to put food on the table and pay a mortgage and all that stuff. So I'm working hard, but I am going to support the people and organizations that stood by me when things were really, and believe me, as bad as things are now, and they're pretty bad. I mean, there's a lot of cancellation going on out there. They used to be really bad, really slim pickings and stuff. So we, Jeff and I are very grateful for all the support that everybody provides. And believe me when I say that in all sincerity, it means a lot. It allows me to, I just put out another one of those tweets. If you guys didn't support, I couldn't have done the 13 podcasts that I did this week. Although Jeff's like, don't do them. Only work for me. You son of a gun. You are supposed to only work for me. You're diluting the market by doing this. But my whole approach is if people ask me to speak, that means that they have a market that they want to get my message to.
Now that's half right what you said. It is true that you dilute, but I'm not saying it for me. I'm just from time to time I bring it up to make sure that you're doing it consciously. And Scott is doing it consciously. He was kind of 75% accurate with what he just said, in the sense that you don't really need to write for these other places.
No, I don't need to.
No, you're doing it for them. That's the truth. It's more lucrative to do it for Substack.
No, it is.
And I don't say don't do it because I'm not about to say be generous only to me.
Why would I
respect and appreciate you for being generous to everybody? And
why would I turn my back on Joe Loria when at a time when nobody would give me a platform? Before you and I came up with this idea, Joe Loria and Consortium News allowed me to come on and allowed me to speak, allowed me to put my ideas about there. And at a time when I was literally making no money, Joe Loria gave me an opportunity to write and bring in an income that helped me, literally help my family survive. I will never turn my back on Joe Loria. Joe Loria is a hell of a guy. Consortium News is a hell of an organization. And I will write for them as long as they want me to write for them. And I will go on their programs as long as they want to. And the same thing, there's a lot of people out there who, look, it's a two-way street. For whatever reason, somehow when I speak on people's podcasts, their numbers blow up. Maybe I'm hypnotic. I don't know. But their numbers go up. But, it's a two-way street. Their numbers go up. It also gets the message out there that helps us. I'm learning about this whole followership.
Yeah, see, I don't think you do it with any ulterior motive. But
no, there's none. There's no.
I know. But that's
there's no business acumen here. None.
Right. But the point I'm making is it winds up actually being to your benefit in the long run. Like you've got all this great support from the other speakers at that 219 rally. And part of it is because you give so much of yourself and they appreciate it. You weren't doing that to get anything in return, but you go on Judge Knapp's show. Every single time you go on, I hear him say that you're our best guest. You're our most popular guest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And many of the other podcast hosts say the same thing. And, they appreciate it.
And just so people know, I don't get anything for it, and I don't want it. I'm literally putting in this week. Good God!
Yeah. So if you think that I'm getting too big a cut, he doesn't get any cut from the other.
I get no cut. Jeff, we have to renegotiate our contract.
Hey, I'm happy. I'm happy.
I'm happy too. This is literally one of the best ideas that you've come up with. this
What do you
show
mean that I've come up with? You came up with this concept. You told me what's his name?
Craig Ferguson.
Craig Ferguson. Yeah.
But we still need Secretariat. I need Secretariat to run across the stage. But
the Lucius thing is myopic. When you're quality, it's an amplification. All right. Let's do a couple of more live ones. If Tori, you still hanging in there? Sorry, we're keeping you up so late. You okay, baby?
Yep, I'm good.
She doesn't sound like
she doesn't sound good.
I'm a little tired.
Be honest. This is the honesty segment right now. All right, let's do two more, and then
and then we got to go. Yeah, I think the
Jack,
audience.
You could just go to bed right now, Tori. I can handle the rest of it if you want.
Okay.
Tristan, U.S. destroyer sails near the Black Sea. USS Nitsy now heading back to the Mediterranean. Odd potential provocation. Thoughts?
First of all, the USS Nitsy is interesting because I believe that might be named after Paul Nitsy, who was one of the negotiators of the INF Treaty. So, good name. He's also one of the guys who brought in NSD 68, which was the National Security Directive that created the Cold War. History lesson there. Sails near the Black Sea. Look, the U.S. we do things under the name of freedom of navigation that have nothing to do with freedom of navigation, everything to do with provocation. And that's that. You said sails near the Black Sea. I have to go and take a look at it. What did it do? Just go up through the Sea of Marmara, approach the Dardanelles, and then turn around? I mean, threaten to come in the Black Sea? I don't know. But yeah, it's a provocation. Everything we do is designed to shake the tree, so to speak, to see what falls, see what fruit falls when you shake it. So we test the Russians. They do things. We collect intelligence from it and try to get some insight into Russian capabilities.
Okay. One more question, and then we'll let Tori go to sleep. Hey, Scotty boy, what do you think about the Southcom comments about the resources in Latin America? Do you think the USA would try something stupid again?
Yes. It's all about resources. And so, I mean, at least the Southcom commander is being honest. And do I think the U.S. would try to do something stupid again? The U.S. is doing stupid stuff. I mean, Southcom, is a launching pad for the CIA and for other various nefarious activities carried out by the United States against sovereign nations to undermine their sovereignty and to exploit their resources to the benefit of the singular benefit of the United States. Yeah.
All right, let's call it a show. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Tori, beloved audience.
Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Tori. And beloved audience.
And thank you, Scott.
Thank you,
you're
Jeff.
Welcome. You're welcome, my dear friend. And we'll be back on Tuesday for the lightning round. That's when Scott answers every question in 3 minutes or less. That's Tuesdays at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Please join us on our other podcast, which is Scenes from the Evolution, this Sunday and every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern time with my co-host, Tori Mansfield. So get some sleep before then, Tori, so you're well rested and perky. And Kevin Michelizzi, our other co-host, who lives in Crimea, by the way. I was thinking about him earlier when you were talking about Crimea. Thanks to everybody for your donations and for your interest and for your participation. We love you. We appreciate you. And special thanks once again to Lorraine in Geneva for this fabulous wine. And I've still got 2 more bottles to go.
Your lips can't get any redder, Jeff.
No, they can't. Take care, everybody.